If you judge how strong an airport is only by passenger volume, then this ranking will most likely surprise you from start to finish. Because truly top-tier airports are not the ones that fly the most, but those that, even with almost no room left to maneuver, can still steadily carry the weight of global air routes. Number 10 is where this capability first begins to appear. Number 10. Tokyo Haneda Airport. No one would think that an airport almost completely wrapped by the city, with no space left to expand, could become one of Asia's most stable hubs. Tokyo's air travel demand was already overflowing decades ago, but around Haneda lies a continuous urban belt stretching toward the sea. Wherever you draw a line, you run into residential districts, industrial zones, and major transport arteries. Yet in this environment, Haneda still has to handle more than 90 million passengers a year. For any airport, that is a hard-mode mission that should be impossible. But instead of giving up, Haneda chose to push efficiency to the extreme. Haneda's real challenge is not how busy it is, but that it has to be precise. All 4 of Haneda's runways are extensions built out on land reclaimed from the sea, and each one runs as if it were pressed right up against the city's edge. That means even a scheduling error of just a dozen seconds can disrupt the entire terminal's rhythm. This is why Haneda has developed a highly distinctive way of operating. You see aircraft being pushed to the gate within minutes after landing, and the pace in the transfer corridors ticks like a clock. None of this is a coincidence. Haneda has to make every single aircraft movement feel like a finely tuned performance, so that such a huge passenger volume can still flow through this restricted piece of land. Interestingly, Haneda's ceiling has not shrunk because of the crowding. It has actually risen. Since expansion on a large scale is unrealistic, Haneda chose to build an ultra-fast passenger flow inside the framework it already has. The distance between domestic and international connections has been compressed to a minimum, while metro lines, monorails and expressways lock the airport into central Tokyo like a screw, letting passengers get from the plane to the city center at a speed other cities can only envy. This is also why, even in an era of the fiercest competition among Asian hubs, Haneda still maintains the kind of punctuality and operating speed people can rely on. Number 9. Shanghai Pudong International Airport. If you only look at today's flight volume, you would never guess where it started. This Asian hub that now handles more than 70 million passengers a year used to be just a wind-swept shoal where the sand could blow into your eyes so you couldn't keep them open. At that time, Shanghai's foreign trade was surging and flight numbers were exploding. Hongqiao Airport's designed capacity was only just over 20 million passengers, but actual traffic once approached 40 million, forcing it to operate under double the intended pressure. So from the very beginning, Pudong was not built just to meet demand. It had to carry Shanghai's growth for the next 20 years. But here comes the problem. You are seeing far more than simply building according to the blueprint. The real key was that it had to be laid out according to the route network of the future. You might wonder, 2 runways aren't enough. Then what about 4? 4 runways together can handle close to 1 million aircraft movements, but the pace of growth in Shanghai's international routes barely leaves any time to adjust. As soon as an international route opens up, the terminals get tight. Once you expand the terminals, passenger numbers grow even faster, and shortly after a new runway is built, it is again running at full capacity. Take T1 and T2 as an example. T2 was originally designed for 40 million passengers, but within just a few years of opening, it was already handling more than 60 million. Pudong has never been about completing a task. Every expansion is followed immediately by a new, bigger starting point. But most people overlook something even more critical. Pudong's layout has never been built to match where things are now. 4 runways are already impressive, yet the airport's land reserves, road system and transport hubs have all left enormous space for further construction. You can even see in the master plans, there are reserved alignments for a 5th and 6th runway. This is not just wiggle room, it is the fundamental reason why Pudong can remain competitive within the global airport system. The growth logic behind it is something that is almost impossible to replicate at any other airport in the world. Number 8. Los Angeles International Airport. If you have been to Los Angeles, you will know this feeling. The airport is clearly under construction, yet you always feel like it is never finished. Los Angeles is one of the most sprawling and car-dependent cities in North America. The city is expanding horizontally, the population is spreading outward, and yet LAX squeezes more than 88 million passengers a year into a ring road of just over 3 kilometers. What does that mean? One of the world's busiest airports, but only 2 main roads carry all the passenger and vehicle flows. So as soon as passenger numbers grow, every access road and every terminal at LAX has its weaknesses instantly magnified. You might think, then just expand it. That is exactly where the problem begins. You may not realize that expanding it is not like adding another building. It is more like dismantling a city. You have to relocate roads without suspending flights, while still not disrupting more than 700 daily aircraft movements. The result? LAX is permanently under construction. From 2008 to now, total expansion spending has exceeded $14 billion, yet it still feels like it is updating itself to the next version. Strangely enough, it remains one of the world's busiest international gateways and has long ranked between 5th and 7th in global passenger traffic. The most crucial point is that many people fail to notice that LAX's geographic position has locked it in. To the east lies the city core, to the west the ocean, and there are already established zoning areas to the north and south. There is no empty land like what Beijing Daxing had, and no chance to reset everything like in Istanbul. LAX is not choosing to keep expanding. It has no choice. It can only keep tweaking, demolishing, and replacing within the existing layout, like a gigantic machine that has to run 24 hours a day and can never be powered down. Yet even within this configuration, where it has almost no room to stretch, it still manages to maintain the flows of global air routes. Number 7. Bangkok Suvarnabhumi Airport. If you knew what this land originally looked like, you might never believe it, that it could hold up an international hub handling more than 60 million passengers a year. The location where Suvarnabhumi now sits was once called the Sea of Tears. Its subsidence rate used to reach 3 to 5 centimeters a year, and the soil's bearing capacity was far below the standard required for building an airport. You might ask, then why insist on building here? Because Bangkok has already been locked in by river networks, the old city and transport hubs. Don Mueang Airport was designed for 36 million passengers, but was squeezed to handle more than 50 million. Bangkok needed a new airport, and it had to be future grade in one shot. But the real difficulty was not that the ground was soft. It was that there was no time to wait for it to harden. To stabilize the foundations would have taken at least more than 10 years. But Bangkok's international passenger growth was jumping in years, with some years even seeing 20% growth. Suvarnabhumi could only adopt one of the most unusual engineering strategies in Asian history. More than 400,000 deep foundation piles nailed the entire airport into the ground. Only then was today's 4,000-meter runway and one of Asia's largest single-terminal buildings created. When Suvarnabhumi opened in 2006, its designed capacity was only 45 million passengers, but it took less than 10 years to break through 60 million, and in some years it has come close to 70 million. Once the runways get tight, they have no choice but to build a second one. Once the terminal is saturated, the East Wing expansion is immediately put on the agenda. But once the East Wing comes into use, passenger numbers rise again, making every plan tight once more. In 2020, work on a third terminal project also began, with future capacity expected to push toward the 100 million mark. Suvarnabhumi is like a rubber band that is constantly being stretched. Each expansion can only relieve the pressure for a short while. It has taken a piece of ground that nobody wanted to touch and forced it to become one of Southeast Asia's most irreplaceable aviation gateways. Number 6. Dubai International Airport. If you see Dubai Airport's scale for the first time, you might think, is that it? Can this really support the world's busiest international air traffic? A quick look at the map shows that DXB is tightly wrapped by the city of Dubai, residential areas and highways, with not an inch of land in any direction that can be easily opened up. Over the past decade, DXB's international passenger numbers have ranked first in the world year after year, peaking at more than 89 million. And all of that is supported by just 2 main runways. In short, this is one of the airports under the greatest runway pressure anywhere in the world. DXB's runways operate under overload conditions for almost the entire year. The airport sees more than 1,100 aircraft movements per day, and the intervals between flights are compressed to under 90 seconds. At such density, any maintenance work on a single runway sends efficiency across the entire airport, toppling like a row of dominoes. Yet international routes continue to pour in. Emirates alone uses DXB as the core node for connecting 6 continents. So you see an extreme scene. The entire airport is like a high-speed production line that cannot slow down, cannot stop, and cannot make mistakes. This is not simply operations. This is pushing everything to the limit. But the real reason DXB ranks 6th is not the airport itself. Dubai's international passengers have long accounted for more than 85% of its total, making it the world's most typical transfer city. It is not serving a single country. It is providing a cross-continental jumping-off point for the whole world. Even if DXB can no longer expand on a large scale, it can still maintain its global influence. On a piece of land that is almost impossible to enlarge, it has borne one of the densest, most international, and most complex route networks on the planet. Number 5. Incheon International Airport, South Korea. You may have seen many airports that are huge, but it is rare to see one whose strength lies in having almost no weaknesses. When Incheon opened in 2001, its design team set it an almost unimaginable goal. It must not develop any structural bottlenecks for decades to come. That is why you see a rare picture. From day one, it was given a 3-runway layout. Its terminals were planned with a 90 million passenger target in mind, and ground transportation was connected to highways and railways right from the start. This is completely different from most other airports. It put the future directly into the blueprint at the beginning. Incheon has been rated by Skytrax as one of the world's best airports for more than 10 consecutive years. Its passenger handling efficiency reaches levels such as average baggage delivery time of 18 minutes, customs clearance that can stay within 10-20 minutes, even at peak times, and flight punctuality that remains high over the long run. At the same time, its international passengers make up more than 75% of its total, making it one of the most transfer-friendly airports among the world's 10 busiest. Even more importantly, South Korea has designated Incheon. It is not just an airport, it is the central node of a regional aviation network. At a time when airports around the world are being expanded, congested, and driven by exploding demand, Incheon seems like it belongs to another world, one that won at the starting line when it was first designed. Number 4. Hamad International Airport. The world is never short of luxurious airports, but very few are like Hamad, where its future was planned from the level of national strategy. Doha's original airport was wholly inadequate, but Qatar Airways' global ambitions needed a world-class hub. So from day one, Hamad was designed to be one of the most important aviation gateways in the Middle East. How bold is its scale? The airport covers 22 square kilometers. The main terminal has a floor area of more than 600,000 square meters, and its baggage handling system alone can process 5,000 pieces per hour, with annual passenger capacity reaching more than 50 million after expansion. Inside, Hamad feels like a city, an atrium more than 40 meters high, one of the largest airport art installations in the world, lamp-bare, plus luxury business zones, yoga rooms, hotels and swimming pools. Its goal is not simply to move passengers through quickly, but to make them want to stay. The data speaks for itself. International transfer passengers account for more than 80% of its traffic, and their satisfaction ratings are consistently near the top worldwide. More crucially, its punctuality, security check speed, and baggage handling speed are all in the first tier among global airports. You might think, with an experience this good, does it sacrifice efficiency? Hamad's answer is no. It runs an extremely intelligent back-end system that raises both throughput and experience to the upper limit. After expansion, its passenger capacity will surge toward the 70 million mark, and the new terminal areas will use daylight roofs and giant indoor gardens, turning the entire airport into the gateway to a future city. Qatar's goal is clear: to make DOH the absolute hub for routes between West Asia, Europe, and Asia. Number 3. Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. The world's busiest airport did not win its title through sheer size. It was forced into first place by the structure of the entire US route network. If you draw all the routes in the United States on a map, you will see them converge on Atlanta as if being pulled in. This is America's most unique layout. Population and business centers in all 4 directions, east, west, south, and north, can all meet here. So even if you do not know this city, you may still have flown through it. More than 100 million people pass through here every year. That is not simply a lot of people. It is because there is no second place in the United States that can handle this level of traffic. But location alone could never create the world's number 1. The real key is its structure. You can see it in the terminal layout. It is not dispersed, not circular, and not multi-core. Instead, it has a single main concourse with multiple parallel concourses branching off. Why? Because this allows passengers to move like water flowing in one direction, without complex detours. The runways follow the same logic. 7 parallel runways are lined up like a factory assembly line, and each one can operate without aircraft having to wait to cut in line. At other airports, peak hours mean congestion, delays, and waiting. In Atlanta, peak hours simply mean increased output. So when you see it handling more than 2,000 aircraft movements a day, it does not feel chaotic. It feels like a production line with a steady rhythm. It has concentrated its entire domestic network and a huge number of international routes on this hub. In other words, you are not just looking at an airport, you are looking at the center of an aviation ecosystem. More than 70% of Delta's traffic flows through here, and transfer passengers reach a scale of 60 million, in some years approaching half of all airport passengers. There may one day be airports that are larger, but one that is as structurally unbeatable as Atlanta exists only in this one place. Number 2. Beijing Daxing International Airport. The year Daxing opened, its passenger numbers were only in the tens of millions, far from the top ranks globally. But a single glance at the terminal's scale tells you that this is an airport designed for more than 100 million passengers a year. The world's largest single terminal building, with more than 700,000 square meters of indoor space, is all concentrated in a central layout of 6 radial concourses. The real shock of Daxing is not just how big its terminal is, but how forward-looking its structure is. Inside the airport, everything is set up for minimal walking distances, the fewest transfer links, and maximum operating efficiency. All 6 concourses point toward the central axis, and metro lines, high-speed rail, and intercity railways all plug directly into the core area. The most critical part of Daxing is not inside the building at all. It lies in the total of up to 7 runways reserved in the long-term plans. That means its ultimate operating capacity may approach the upper limit of the world's top tier. Its planned long-term throughput surpasses 100 million passengers, and in some extreme future scenarios, it may even exceed 130 million. Although it is a new airport, it has already built China's next 30 years of air travel growth into one of the top places in the world. Number 1. Istanbul Airport. Some airports are built for passenger traffic, but Istanbul Airport was built to put a city back at the center of the world. Before the new airport opened, the old Istanbul Airport was already cramming more than 60 million passengers into a piece of land that could no longer be expanded. In most other countries, the response would have been expansion. But Turkey's thinking was completely different. It wanted to make Istanbul once again the gateway connecting 3 continents. So the new airport is not just an enlarged version of the old one, it is a future map laid out directly on the ground. An area so large it feels like an entirely new city. Runway layouts with expansion designed in from the outset, and terminal structures built on a long-term target of 100 million passengers a year. If you draw lines on the map, you will see something remarkable. Europe to Asia, Asia to Africa, Africa to the Middle East. Many of the shortest cross-continental routes can loop back through Istanbul. So once the new airport opened, passenger numbers immediately jumped to more than 70 million, and the number of international routes quickly broke past 200. These figures alone show that IST has captured the center of gravity of global air routes. 3 parallel runways are designed to operate simultaneously, letting flights move like traffic on a multi-lane highway. When you see the airport drawing in more than 70 million people a year, that is only what has been filled so far. The space it has reserved is meant to hold an entire generation's worth of future air travel demand. Its goal was never just to be an airport, it was to be the blueprint of a global hub. Rankings are only the result. What truly determines their position is how each of them withstands the flow of the world's traffic. Thank you for watching. Feel free to share your thoughts, and we'll see you next time.